the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and its GCC allies, as well as its allies outside the GCC, have made a decision to respond to the legitimate request by the legitimate president of Yemen and to provide the assistance needed. And so the operations have begun in Yemen. The objective is...
That is the Saudi ambassador to the United States announcing the other day that military operations by the Saudi kingdom have begun in Yemen. Just one of the stories we're following on a very busy Friday morning here from America's Forum with Miranda Khan, J.D. Hayworth.
Yeah, it's going to be very busy week, right? The ambassador went on to say that the possibility exists of the Saudis creating their own nuclear bomb to counterbalance a nuclear-armed Iran.
This after word yesterday that a nuclear deal involving Iran and the United States is apparently within reach after our nation made major concessions, all too predictably, during the latest round of talks.
Meanwhile, reports are also out that the Pentagon quietly declassified a Department of Defense top secret document. It details Israel's nuclear program last month, and it breaks a decades-old agreement to not release it.
That same document kept nuclear details from Italy, France, West Germany, and other NATO countries classified, those sections blocked out. So with all this going on, are we looking at the start of a nuclear arms race in the Middle East? With more on these developing stories, we're pleased to be joined by Congressman Louie Gohmert, an old colleague of mine. He's a member of the House Judiciary Committee. Also, we're joined from Newsmax Washington by Pete Hoekstra, a former congressman, once upon a time the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. To you both, gentlemen, thanks for being here. And we would be remiss if we did not start with yet another developing story. Reports out that Senator Harry Reid will not seek re-election. Louie, first, your reaction to that news.
Well, first of all, I would hope that you would say that we're not just old colleagues, including Pete, but actually we're friends. I hope you'd admit that publicly. But
I'm very happy to admit that friendship, but we will draw the limit at the House gymnasium. We will not reveal those early mornings in there trying to get ready for work.
What happens there stays there. But,
yeah.
Listen, I want to dispel the rumor that there's any connection between the way the president's gone after Israel and the way they have completely capitulated on Iranian talks and Harry Reid giving it up. You hate to see anybody, friend or opponent, that gets so badly decimated by exercise equipment. I know it's a common thing that everybody worries about, but Harry Reid won't be there after the next election, be kicked around anymore, like Richard Nixon, said about himself. But I tell you, this disclosure of the nuclear capabilities, I mean, it is a 1987 document, but it is outrageous. And the fact that, as you pointed out, J.D., they covered up the information about France, Germany, and Italy makes it very clear this is very personal against Israel. This was done to hurt Israel. This was done to try to back them off. There's no question about that. And look at the timing. Apparently, the Pentagon quietly declassified this on February 12th. If you remember, originally, Netanyahu was scheduled to speak to Congress on February 11th. That got moved to March the 3rd and there were continued pushes by the White House and other groups, pushing to have him back off and not come at all. And so then not only does he not back off, they reschedule for March the 3rd, and here quietly the Pentagon quietly declassifies this 387-page report that is just unconscionable. If you will do this to an ally, you will do it to anybody. I mean,
and Louie, on that note, we've got less than a minute in the segment. Let's let the former chairman of the Intelligence Committee weigh in. Pete, 45 seconds on this.
Well, on the Israel deal, as Congressman Gohmert said, and Louie, it's great to be with you. It's absolutely outrageous. Disclosing this report, 28 years later. But this has been an agreement. This, again, is one of the long-standing policies that this president is just throwing under the bus. But most importantly, like he's done all across the Middle East, he's throwing our friends and allies under the bus one after the other.
Gentlemen, on that note, we'll hold up. We should also note that in our next hour, Alan Dershowitz will comment on the declassification of this nuclear information involving Israel. And when we come back, more news, political news from Washington and foreign policy news from the Middle East with our two guests. Stay tuned. With Miranda Kahn, J.D. Hayworth back with you on America's Forum. Likewise back with us, two gents with whom we want to continue our conversation. Congressman Louie Gohmert is on the phone, and from Newsmax Washington, former Congressman Pete Hoekstra. Pete, we have not gotten your reaction yet to the Harry Reid retirement. Your take on the Senate Democrat leader calling it quits at the end of this term.
Well, I think it's a significant announcement. Two things to look for. Who's the new leader going to be? It's probably going to be Chuck Schumer, but is he going to be more accommodating and bring a different sense to the Senate where in 2017 they may actually be able to start to work together and become an effective body? The second thing I think it demonstrates is that the Democrats are getting nervous. They may not be taking the majority back in 2017. Nevada is a seat that the Republicans can win. But, J.D., if I can take the lead here for just a second, I'm really interested as we watch the free fall of American foreign policy, especially in the Middle East. Louie, what can Congress do? What's the sentiment on the Hill? You got Yemen, you got a bad Iran deal becoming even worse. What can Congress do, and what do you expect to do when you get back in session?
Well, what I'm hoping we'll do is pass something in both the House and Senate, since both bodies are nearly every senator, nearly every member of Congress is so concerned about the ongoing well-being of Israel that we need to defund any effort, make it illegal to go any further on this deal with Iran. I'm sure you guys have seen in the last 24 hours. Basically, the administration that had already capitulated on most every important term now says they're not going to require verification of what Iran has. How could you ever have any kind of deal on nuclear talks if you can't even find out where they are at any given time, and even starting the deal? So it is just outrageous. And Pete, I know, having been on intelligence, you know so much that you'd have to kill us if you told us. But having met with some of our so-called allies in the Middle East, they're concerned about the United States being trustworthy. And if you recall last year, there was one point where Egypt and Saudi Arabia joined forces to have a bombing run in Libya without telling the United States.
And Louie,
they know they can't trust us.
Louie, as you catalog these difficulties, I want to see if there's a political angle based on the news of Harry Reid this morning. With Harry announcing his retirement, does that liberate him as the Democrat Senate leader to now take a tougher line with the president in this proposed Iranian deal? Do you think he might find his senatorial chops and get out from under always protecting and defending the White House?
Well, that's the problem, and you put your finger on it. Right now, he has all kinds of leverage to force the White House to back off, to do whatever Harry Reid thinks is appropriate. He has the leverage now. Now, he's going to be a lame duck. They know he's not going to be there, and he's going to have even less leverage. He's going to be less consequential, even if he takes a hard line. And, you guys were in Congress before I was, but I was told back 70s, 80s, 90s, that, and even with Bush, some of us took hard lines behind the scenes. But one of the problems with Congress these days is that Democrats will not stand up to Obama, whereas any other president, both House leaders and Senate leaders from both parties would quietly travel down Pennsylvania and tell the president to back off of something that was really hurting America or our allies. The Democrats simply do not do that anymore.
Hey, Louie, do you have an announcement you want to make on Newsmax this morning? I heard you had some interesting, created some interesting speculation yesterday. We'd love you to make the announcement right here,
You
right
cracked
now.
him up. I mean, you're Congressman Gohmert. Now listen.
Listen.
What's the story? Are you going to run for president?
Look, the media was all up in arms. Gee, people were wanting to know why I endorsed Ted Cruz. I mean, Ted Cruz, I love the guy. He's fantastic. He's a dear friend. I think he will make an awesome president. But, this is such a serious issue about presidential candidates. I made a rather ironic or sarcastic, tongue-in-cheek comment that when they were wanting to know, well, are you endorsing Ted Cruz? Or are you endorsing? And so just to slap back, said, well, I haven't ruled out, forming my own exploratory committee. But the truth is that if you go back to Kennedy-Nixon debates, where
we don't have time yet. We got 10 seconds. Yes or no, Louie?
Are you running?
There's not ever going to be a bald president elected in my life.
Oh, he's not running. But we'll come back. Thanks, gents. Up next, Michael Reagan.